The case you're about to see is a fictional one, but the procedure is legally accurate. The characters are played by actors, but the jury is selected from members of the general public.
I'm not guilty, sir.
And on the second count, you are similarly charged, and the particulars are that on Friday, June 16th at Fulchester, you did similarly...
I'm not guilty, sir.
Just one moment, please, Mr. Barton. The particulars are that on Friday, June 16th at Fulchester, you did incite Geoffrey Neil Gibson, also under the age of 14 years...
Don't worry, Geoffrey. Nothing to worry about, love. Everything's going to be all right.
Just tell him the truth, son, that's all. The plain, simple truth. Now, there's nothing can beat that.
You'll speak up nice and clearly, won't you, love?
Yeah, speak up nice and clear, son, that's all. And tell him the plain, simple truth, right?
You'll try to speak, well, you know what I mean. Nicely, love. All right?
Yes, speak nicely and tell him the plain, uncomplicated truth, then you'll be all right, right?
Yes, Mum. Yes, Dad. Now, there's nothing to worry about. Not a thing, Dad, all right?
Nothing at all, as long as you tell him the plain, simple truth, right?
It's all right, Mum. It's all right. It's all right, Mum. It's all right.
Sit down, Mr. Barton, please.
Call Geoffrey Neil Gibson, please.
Geoffrey Neil Gibson.
Hold the book in your right hand and read aloud the words on the card.
I promise by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Would you give your full name and address, please?
Geoffrey Neil Gibson, 32 Park Road, Fulchester.
How old are you?
12 and a half, sir.
And where were you on the afternoon of Friday, June the 16th last year? Can you remember?
Yes, sir, it's at the fair with my friend Martin, sir.
What time were you there?
About 3 o'clock, sir.
What were you doing there at that time on a Friday afternoon? How is it you weren't at school?
It was half term, sir.
Yes, thank you. Now, my lord, I have here photostat copies of an agreed exhibit. It's a simplified sketch plan of the part of Fallowfield Common where the offences in question are alleged to have taken place. I believe you yourself already have a copy, my lord, so does my learned friend for the defence. I wonder if copies might be given to the witness and to members of the jury, please.
Thank you.
Members of the jury, you'll see it's a very simplified plan of the layout of the northern end of Fallowfield Common.
Does it say anywhere on it what the scale is, Mr. Edgar?
No, my lord, as I say, it's a very simplified plan. What? Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, my lord, I'm instructed that the scale is, in fact, that 6 inches represents 100 yards.
Thank you.
Now, Geoffrey, do you see that plan? Do you recognise that as a sort of rough outline plan of the part of the common where the fair was on June the 16th?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, first of all, do you see that part shown as rough ground there where the fairground stalls and sideshows and roundabouts and so on were?
Yes, sir.
Did you go there at all that afternoon?
Yes, sir.
Now, do you see the part where those bushes and trees and shrubbery are marked, as it were, between the fairground area and the main road?
The footpath's coming up from the main road, going past the pond. Yes, sir, we went there after a bit.
Yes. And why did you go there? Why there?
We're looking for a 50p piece. It fallen out of Martin's pocket or something, so we went back and started to look for it.
Now, while you and Martin were searching in the grass and round the bushes and so on, did something happen?
Yes, sir, he came and spoke to us, sir, that man.
Well, just leave that for the moment, Geoffrey, but a man came and spoke to you. Was he someone you knew?
No, sir, he wasn't. I'd never ever seen him before.
Yes. Now, do you remember what he said, just the first few words?
I think he said, "What you doing, or what you looking for, or have you lost something, or something like that?"
Yeah, well, do you remember which of those it was, Geoffrey?
I'm not sure. I think he said, "Have you lost some money?"
Yeah, it's all right, you see, Geoffrey, you can take your time, but just try and remember what his very first words were.
I can remember what he said afterwards, though. He said, let's all go and have some fun in the bushes.
Now, just a moment now, Geoffrey. I know this is very unpleasant and upsetting for you, but perhaps if you just take your time and collect your thoughts for a moment, you'll be able to remember.
Martin said he ought to be locked up. And we ran away as fast as we could, and ran straight home and told Mum. And when Dad came, I told him, and Dad said people like him ought to be locked up.
Yes, well, just a moment, Geoffrey. Did you, in fact, run away and run straight home, or did quite a lot of things happen in between?
It was only because the coppers made us. They said he had to tell them about
Yes, it's
it
all right,
and help them catch him, and we did. And
Yes,
that's
yes.
him there, that's him.
Yes, it's all right. I think we... Yes, right. My lord, I think the most sensible course would be for the boy to be allowed to leave the witness box and compose himself, and in the meantime, while he's doing so, I can call the other boy.
Yes, that seems to me to be sensible, Mr. Edgar. Have you any objection, Mr. Nizzard?
No, my lord.
Oh, no, this is
Silence in court.
That's all right, Geoffrey. That's all, thank you. You may leave the witness box for the time being.
Thank you.
Call Martin Trevor Clark, please.
Martin Trevor Clark.
Hold the book in your right hand and repeat the words on the card.
Just shut up, right?
Why don't you shut up?
I don't know about shut up.
See?
What do you mean, see?
If only had done what I said and told her. Plain, straightforward, simple,
George, will you please shut up?
But why don't you shut up for a
All
change?
right, it's all right.
About this, I should think. About exactly where that third bush is.
Did you know him? Had you ever seen him before?
No, sir, never.
Now, Martin, I know this would be rather upsetting and embarrassing for you, but would you please try and tell us, in your own words and time, your own way, just of the conversation that took place between you?
Yes, sir, I'll try. He stopped by the path and looked at us. Then after a minute he said, "What's the matter? Have you lost something?" I said, "Yes, I've lost a 50-pence piece." Then he said, "I know where you'd get a 50-pence piece each. Would you like one? I mean one each." I said, "I don't know what you mean. What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, if you come over there behind that tree with me, we will have a nice good play with one another. I'll give you a 50-pence piece each."
Did you know what he meant, exactly what he was suggesting by what he was saying?
Yes, sir. He wanted me to do an indecent act with him.
And after he made that suggestion, what did you say?
I told him to push off, or I'd report him.
Yes, did you want to say something more about that?
Well, to be honest, sir, what I think I actually said to him was, "Piss off."
And what did he reply to that?
He said, "Fancy a nice young boy like you using words like that."
And what was he wearing at the time? Can you tell us?
Blue jacket, dark blue with brass buttons, dark trousers, and an open-neck sports shirt with small checks. I'm not absolutely sure if he was wearing the coat all the time, though. It was a rather hot day, and some of the time he might have been carrying it over his arm.
And can you describe for us what he looked like?
About medium height, not tall, not thin, but not very fat either. Middle-aged, well, getting on a bit. His eyes were sort of bluey green. He'd got brown hair, going a bit thin on the top, cut quite short.
Do you see him in this courtroom here today?
Yes, him, there.
Thank you. Now, will you go on in your own words, please, Martin? Will you tell us what happened next?
Then I suddenly shouted, "Come on, Jeff, run!" We ran as hard as we could back to where the sideshows and all the people were, and Jeff and I reported him to the two coppers.
Yes, and then what happened?
One of them said he and the other policeman would walk around the fairground with us to see if we could spot him.
And did you?
Yes, we did. It was amazing. We went past, I think, a rifle stall, and there he was, as large as life, chatting away to a group of 5 or 6 other boys, as though nothing had happened.
And it was the same man who only perhaps 5 or 10 minutes earlier had been making suggestions to you that you commit acts of gross indecency with him in the bushes.
Yes, sir. Same man, same clothes. So then the coppers went right up to him and nicked him. Arrested him.
Well, was any more said after that? I don't mean by the policemen or by him to them. I mean by him to you or you to him.
No. Not for a long time, anyway.
Sorry, Martin, I'm afraid I don't quite understand what you mean.
I mean, nobody said anything then. But later on, he was leaning against the back of the stall, with his eyes shut. Then he suddenly opened them and said, "Who are you? Why are you doing this?"
Well, who was he saying that to? To you, to Geoffrey, to the police, or who?
I don't know. I couldn't make it out who he meant because he had his eyes shut. After that, we didn't see him again because the policeman with the car came. Well, not until much later on, down at the police station.
Yes, well, I think you'd better tell us about that, would you please, Martin, about what happened at the police station?
They took me downstairs. I looked through a sort of peephole thing in the cell door, and there he was, sitting at the edge of the bed, with his head in his hands. I had to wait quite a bit until he moved his hands and I could see his face.
And so you identified him there at the police station yet again?
Yes, sir.
Well, now, Martin, the man who made the suggestion to you and Geoffrey in the woods, the man you pointed out almost 10 minutes later to the police officers, the man you identified at the police station after you'd made your statement, and that man who is sitting there now. Are you absolutely certain that they were and are all one and the same person?
Yes, sir, I am. That's definitely him. And I think he's a downright disgusting, dirty old man.
Martin, is it the first time that such a thing has happened to you personally, that a man has made an indecent suggestion to you of this sort?
Mr. Nisbet, I'm not at all sure what it is you're going to suggest.
May the witness answer the question, my lord?
Well, I should prefer first to have some indication of the direction you're going in.
For the extent of the preparedness or otherwise of the witness to know how to deal with it.
Well, I should have thought myself... Well, you may proceed a little further, Mr. Nisbet, but I'm holding myself very ready to interrupt.
My lord, I'm suggesting, you see, that you knew immediately what he was suggesting, that it took you hardly any time at all to know what he was after. How long would you say your conversation with him lasted?
Not long. 5 minutes, perhaps.
Yes, well, while you were recounting it in evidence earlier, I took the trouble to time it on my wristwatch, and it came to just over 1 minute. So should we say perhaps 2 minutes at the outside?
Well, yes. I suppose so, then.
Yes. How close would you say he came to you at any time?
Not near. I made sure I kept a good bit of space between us to give us the start to run.
Yes, of course, quite right, too. But what was the nearest he came to you?
It's hard to say. About... Sorry, I'm afraid I'm not very good at distances.
Well, as near as we are to each other now, or a bit nearer, a bit further away?
Bit nearer.
Ah, my lord, may I? I'll come down to you, shall I? And you tell me when to stop.
Yes, about there.
About here. Now, Martin, you and I have been talking together a lot longer than you and this man who approached you by the path through the wood. Tell me, Martin, what colour would you say my eyes are?
Blue, I think.
Ah, not really, Martin, are they? No. But of course, that's a very easy mistake to make. Lots of us hardly notice things like that. No, you recognised and saw the colour of the eyes of this man, Mr. Barton, under circumstances we shall come to later, when the police officers had arrested him.
No, I recognised him by his coat, his trousers, his face, and his hair as well.
Well, is there anything really so remarkable or striking about his face or hair that would make him outstanding among all those other people on and around and about the common of similar age and height and build?
Yes, his eyes.
Well, I think we've disposed of the subject of his eyes, Martin. Now, you go to Fulchester Park Comprehensive School, is that right? And you're in the third form?
Yes, sir. 3A, sir.
Yes, it's a mixed school, mixed classes of boys and girls.
Yes, sir.
And it has quite a reputation, a very high one, hasn't it, for being a modern and progressive school in very many different ways.
Yes, sir. I think so, sir. I think it has.
Yes, there's a very good library there, I believe, a very big one, too.
Yes, sir.
That any pupil can use without restriction or censorship.
Yes, sir.
Yes. And it contains, for example, books such as this one, which gives very detailed advice and diagrams on both male and female methods of contraception, and this one, which includes information about how to deal with obscene telephone calls.
These books are all in the school library, eh?
Yes, my lord, they have the labels in the front. They were lent to us for these proceedings.
Really?
Martin, do you recollect reading any particular ones of these?
Not reading all the way right through, sir. No, sir.
But you're familiar with them?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Though at your school you're not just left by yourself to find out about things, are you?
Sir?
Well, you have regular weekly form discussions about any subject that any pupil wishes to suggest.
Yes, sir.
Yes, and sometimes, instead of a discussion with a member of the staff, an outside speaker is invited to come.
Yes, sir.
When was the last time one of these outside speakers came?
Last week, sir, an old woman came from the local Natural History Society with a tank of axolotls.
A tank of what?
Axolotls, sir. They're like prehistoric goldfish.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, well, I'm sorry. What I actually meant, Martin, was who was the last visiting speaker you had before the fair? Well, am I right in thinking it was a policeman who came to give you a talk? What did he talk about?
Well, crime, sir.
Yes, but his talk had a title, didn't it? Do you remember what it was called? Oh, may I prompt you? It was called, wasn't it, Common Sense? And he didn't mince his words, did he? Among other things, he spelt out very clearly to both the boys and the girls the sort of things that some men try to get them to do of a sexual nature in return for a reward of, say, sweets or money.
Yes, sir.
Now, on that afternoon at the fair, when you and Geoffrey ran away from the man, you almost immediately saw a policeman standing there in plain clothes, the very same one who'd been at your school just recently and given your class a talk.
I didn't recognise him, sir.
Did you swear on oath to that, Martin?
Yes, sir.
Well, you say you can recognise one man after speaking to him for less than 2 minutes, and yet you didn't recognise another man, a policeman who'd only recently been at your school and sat or stood in front of your class, giving a talk for over half an hour, answering questions. You didn't recognise him a week or two later when you saw him at the fair.
No, sir. I went up to him and said, "Excuse me, but you know I can find a policeman, please?" And he said, "I'm a policeman, son. What do you want?"
Well, just one final question, Martin, that's all. I don't want to continue the strain on you. Now, when you and Geoffrey went with Detective Constable Hargreaves and his colleague to try and find the man who had made this indecent suggestion to you, as you've already described, it was amazing. There he was, large as life. Now, I put it to you that one of the policemen said to you something like, "Look, him there. Is that him?" Is that how it was? Something like that?
I don't really remember quite what happened.
The policeman pointed him out to you, and you agreed that he was pointing out the right man. Is that correct?
My lord, my learned friend is really putting words into the witness' mouth in the most flagrant...
No, sir. I think it was me who said, "Look, that's him."
Martin, this is a very, very important point, which we must get
You
absolutely...
have your answer, Mr. Nisbet.
Thank you, Martin. I have no more questions.
I've no wish to re-examine at all, thank you, my lord.
Yes, Martin, thank you. Then you may leave the witness box.
Thank you.
He was at that time standing talking by a shooting gallery store with a group of 5 or 6 other older boys, laughing and having a competition with them to see who was the best shot, presumably. I went up to him and asked if I could have a word with him. Please, my lord, may I? Thank you. He said, "Yes, of course, officer, by all means, isn't it a lovely afternoon?" I took him on one side, out of earshot of the boys by the rifle stall, and I said, "Do you recognise either of those 2 boys standing over there?" Pointing at Martin Clark and Geoffrey Gibson, who were standing at a slight distance with Detective Constable Wilkinson. He said, "No, I don't think so. Why?" I said, "They've both made accusations of indecent suggestions by you, and I'm taking you into custody."
Well, officer, is that your full note on that point?
Yes, it is, my lord. I don't use a notebook very much. I can usually remember details without any great difficulty.
Well, did he say anything in reply to that?
Yes, he did. He said, "No, no, no, no," like that 4 times in succession, and then, "No, it wasn't me."
Nothing else?
Not at that time, no. Later on, quite a bit later, about half an hour afterwards it would be, whilst we were waiting for Detective Constable Wilkinson to bring the car round, he said, "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" I said, "We are police officers, as..." I said, "We are police officers. As you know, complaints have been made against you, and we are taking you down to the station." He then closed his eyes and put his head back against the side of the rifle stall that we were standing against and seemed to go to sleep.
Go to sleep?
It was a very hot afternoon, my lord, and I presumed he was rather drowsy as a result of having had a drink.
Oh, my lord, I really must object most strenuously to that.
Must you, Mr. Nisbet? Why is that? The officer only said that he had the impression that the man was drowsy. He wasn't suggesting, were you, that he was under the influence of drink?
Oh, no, in no way, my lord. No, most certainly not.
Oh, is it part of your case, Mr. Nisbet, that your client is a teetotaler?
I know, my lord, it is not.
I should have thought then the point was almost one being made in your favour, to explain what would otherwise look like indifference to the seriousness of the situation. Would you like to go on, Mr. Edgar?
Thank you, my lord. And when you'd taken him to the police station, officer, did he elect to make a statement which was taken down in writing and afterwards signed by him?
Yes, my lord, that's quite correct.
May he be shown Exhibit 2, please?
Thank you.
Is that the exhibit?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to say in the adamantly, does he not, that the boys were completely mistaken and that before they pointed him out of the rifle range stall, he'd neither spoken a word with them in his life?
Yes, that's perfectly correct. I think it's only fair...
Yes?
I was going to say, my lord, I think it's only fair to point out that he never at any time said anything from the moment that I first approached him which could in any way be construed as an admission of guilt.
Well, I think that's a very commendable observation in these days when we hear so many accusations by accused persons of police making up statements of guilt and attributing them to them.
Constable, about how many people were there at the fair on the common the afternoon you...
Very many, my lord. The fair hadn't properly got going. I'd say about 250. 300 at the most, that's all.
300? Well, actually, that's quite a large number. Considered in terms of singling out one individual within a space of 4 or 5 minutes. In fact, the speed of it can only be explained as an incredible and fantastic piece of luck. Or is there possibly one other explanation?
I'm sorry, my lord, I don't understand the question.
Well, may I have a look at your notebook, officer? Would you open it for me, please, at the page you read out to us when he said, "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" Yes, you just print occasional words rather widely spaced across the page, do you?
What might be called the key words, yes.
And I see you more or less ignore punctuation altogether, let it, as it were, speak for itself. We are police officers. As you know, complaints have been made against you. Well, when he began, my learned friend for the prosecution said that this was a perfectly simple, ordinary, straightforward case. Well, it is not. Not at all. Far from it. We are police officers, as you know. Complaints have been made against you. Yes, officer, you do know the accused very well, don't you? In fact, you yourself have arrested him several times in the past. Hasn't he already served 6 prison sentences for gross indecency with boys?
Tomorrow you can join us again when the case of the Queen against Barton will be resumed in the Crown Court. Reginald Barton has pleaded not guilty to charges of inciting 2 schoolboys to commit gross indecency. The defence say he was arrested because the police knew he had several convictions already for the same offence, and because they pointed him out to the 2 boys.
Well, what is your address and occupation, Mr. Barton?
I live at Flat 2, Prince's Court, Hill Road. I am the site manager for the firm of Vincent Brothers, builders and contractors.
And the flat you live in is the home of your widowed mother, Mrs. Barton, I believe, and you pay her £35 a week towards your rent and keep.
Yes, sir.
And how long have you been living with her in the flat in Hill Road?
For the last 6 months. I went to live there immediately after I was last convicted.
Which was at which court, and your sentence was what?
It was a Broxley Crown Court, and the sentence was for 2 years imprisonment, which was suspended by 3 years, sir.
What was it for, Mr. Barton?
Attempt to... No, I'm sorry. Incitement of a boy under the age of 14 to commit an act of gross indecency.
To which you pleaded?
Guilty, sir.
And how many previous convictions have you for this, or at any rate for offences of this kind?
14, sir.
And going back over the past, what, almost 25 years, is it, since you were about 30?
Yes, sir. I'm 54 now, so that will be since I was 29, sir.
And have all these convictions resulted in prison sentences?
No, sir. 6 of the last 14 have resulted in prison sentences. Well, 7, actually. I think technically the last one counts as a prison sentence, even though it was ordered to be suspended, sir.
But anyway, you've been actually in prison 6 times. It was only the first few times that you were punished with such things as fines and probation?
Yes, sir.
That is the defendant's antecedent history, is it, Mr. Nisbet?
Yes, my lord.
Do you wish to exhibit it? Are we to have copies of it?
Oh, it was not my intention to offer it formally as such, but I would willingly do so and have copies made for members of the jury. There's nothing whatever on it that we wish to or intend to hide.
Yes, sir, it would seem. However, well, no. Proceed for the moment.
My lord. Now, on these previous occasions, Mr. Barton, on all of them, it is true to say, is it not, that you pleaded guilty without hesitation to every one of the charges?
Yes, I did, sir.
And why is that? Why have you always pleaded guilty?
Because I always was guilty, sir.
And have you always been completely honest in admitting it?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Barton, have you ever pleaded guilty to, no, I'll put that a bit stronger. Have you ever, in the whole of your life, been charged with offences of any other kind whatsoever?
No, sir, I have not.
No offences, for instance, involving such things as theft, burglary, embezzlement, fraud, or any kind of dishonesty whatsoever?
No, certainly not.
Were you at one time a member of a sailing boat club which operated on the waters of the local authorities' disused clay pits at Stonestead?
Yes, sir.
And did you hold voluntary office for almost the whole of that period on the committee of the club?
Yes, I was the honorary treasurer, sir.
What sort of sums were involved? How much money passed through your hands, let's say, in a year?
About £2,000, sir.
And when your treasurership came to a somewhat abrupt end 2 years ago when you were sent to prison, did the officials of the club appoint somebody else as treasurer, and did he naturally immediately check the club's books to see what the finances were in?
Yes, they did, sir.
And on the last occasion when you were in trouble, that is 6 months ago when you were on trial at Broxley Crown Court, and there was then the possibility that if you were not sent to prison, you would be able to obtain your present job as site manager for the building and contracting firm of Vincent's. Did that person, the person who became the treasurer of the sailing club, write this letter to Vincent's, in which he said, "I found the books of the club had been kept in perfect order by Mr. Barton while he was treasurer, and there was not a single error or discrepancy or shortage of any kind."
Yes, he did, sir.
Well, one of the reasons for his writing that, of course, Mr. Barton, was that it was a sort of reference, wasn't it, for Vincent's, because the job they were going to give you if you were not sent to prison would involve you in handling large sums of cash.
Yes, well, the paying out of the weekly site wages.
And how much money passes through your hands there, Mr. Barton?
Well, it varies, of course, with the number of men on the site, but I would say in the average of over, well, £10,000 a week, sir.
And Vincent's have no fears in entrusting you with the responsibility of handling such large sums of money in cash?
Apparently not, no, sir.
You're being modest, Mr. Barton. They know you for what you are, and what your answers to my questions continuously show you to be, a man of complete integrity and total honesty. And Vincent's managing director, Mr. Samuels, is here himself and will speak on your behalf later and give us his opinion of your character.
Yes, sir, he has kindly offered to give up his time and come here and do that.
Did he know when he offered you this job with his firm 6 months ago that you had this sort of record?
Oh, yes, I told him.
What, all of it, every single detail?
Yes, sir.
Good. Well, now, will you look at this letter, please? Is that a letter which Mr. Samuels wrote to your solicitor whilst you were in custody awaiting trial? And does he write in that he thought you were perhaps the most painfully honest person he'd ever met?
Well,
yes, he does. Now, I'd like to turn now for a few moments to a different subject altogether, the subject of gross indecency itself. In these days of not only freedom of speech, but of a different kind of free speech altogether, those two words do sound what they are, a lurid, overvivid, old-fashioned and vague piece of legal jargon. What it actually means is sexually fondling someone or just touching them, doesn't it? Or encouraging them to do it to you. What it emphatically does not mean is anything more than that, does it?
Are you suggesting that it's not a serious offence?
Oh, no, my lord, I'm certainly not. However, Mr. Barton, perhaps we can go on to another subject of relevance to you. In recent years, say the last 10 or 12 years or so, on the occasions when you've been in prison, have you ever received treatment of any kind for your condition?
No, sir, I've not.
Mr. Nisbet, imprisonment is treatment.
Yes, I'm sorry, my lord. I'll put it again to make my meaning clear. Mr. Barton, in prison, have you ever been given any kind of medical psychiatric treatment?
No, sir, none whatsoever.
Have you ever been offered any while you were there?
No, sir.
Have you ever made any efforts to obtain any while there?
Yes, sir, during my last sentence. I was told there was none available at the prison I was in.
And, yes, I'm sorry, go on.
Well, I was going on to say, sir, that I was also told that there was no point in asking for a transfer to another prison because the only one that had facilities for the kind of treatment I needed was full up. And anyway, they didn't take prisoners with sentences as short as mine either.
Thank you for making that clear. I was going to go on to ask, had you sought treatment of any kind while you were out of prison?
Well, to be truthful, it was only when Mr. Samuel started taking an interest that I started thinking about it again. When I was last charged at Broxley 6 months ago, I think one of the things that influenced the judge into making the sentence a suspended one was that Mr. Samuels told him he'd found a doctor who was prepared to take me on as a patient.
Yes, you're referring to Dr. Andrew Allen, a psychiatrist at St. Saviour's Mental Hospital, who will be called on your behalf later on.
Yes.
You go to St. Saviour's on a voluntary basis as an outpatient, do you?
Yeah, I go twice a week, yes.
And have you been going every week, twice a week, since you were convicted at Broxley 6 months ago?
Yes, sir.
How many times have you missed going so far, Mr. Barton?
Well, not once. Well, that is not until...
Yes, until you were arrested and kept in custody to await this trial. Yes. Was it a condition of the sentence being suspended that you received treatment from Dr. Allen?
No, sir.
But it was a condition of your sentence being suspended that you were put under a probation officer's supervision?
Yes, but I wanted to. I wanted to make it absolutely clear to my mother that I was doing everything I could.
Everything you could in what respect?
To change myself.
Yes, this was a subject of, to say the least, of some great tension between your mother and yourself, I believe, for some time in the past.
Well, for almost the last 8 years, sir. During my last 3 terms of imprisonment, my mother has refused to visit me or have anything to do with me. And, well, even between times when I was not in prison, if I tried to see her or even telephone her, she said she couldn't have anything to do with me. It's not her fault. She's old and her heart's very bad. She couldn't take the pain and the disgrace and the humiliation I was constantly bringing to her.
Yes, but as I understand it now, she has had a change of heart and has provided you once again with a home with her. Why is that?
I don't know, sir. Out of the Christian goodness of her heart, sir.
Oh, no.
Silence, please.
Well, Mr. Samuels went to see her, and as I understand it, he introduced her to Dr. Allen, who told her he was prepared to take me on as a patient, and Mr. Samuels said he would give me a job or offer to do so, and that possibly the court would be prepared to look favourably upon a positive treatment plan.
Yes, thank you. You've been very frank about a very painful subject, yet again. Now, Mr. Barton, these 2 boys say you gave them 50 pence each to commit an act of gross indecency with them. Did you?
No, sir, I did not.
So are you suggesting that they're lying?
No, what I'm saying is that somebody asked them to, but it wasn't me. I wasn't anywhere near where the incident occurred. I came to the common from the exact opposite direction, from the opposite side, from the direction of St. Saviour's Hospital, where I'd been having a therapy session with Dr. Allen.
Well, the police officer says the boys identified you to him. Do you suggest that he's lying?
Oh, no, I'm sure he's not deliberately.
Now, Mr. Barton, all these things The judge, on the previous occasion, showing you leniency and suspending your term of imprisonment. Mr. Samuels befriending you and giving you a good job and getting Dr. Allen to take you on as a patient. Dr. Allen treating you himself twice a week at the hospital. And your mother, after many years of estrangement, giving you a home once again with her. All these things happening to you all at once 6 months ago. What did they make you feel?
For years, I never dared think that there was such a thing as hope at all. But there was hope. There was. And as long as I go on being absolutely and completely honest about every single thing, there is.
And would you dream of jeopardizing it, let alone throwing it away?
No, never, no.
And did you, on that day, or for that matter, any other day, make any kind of indecent suggestions to anyone at all on the common?
I swear on my oath before God, no.
Oh. Mr. Barton, you are, or so it would seem we should believe, one of the most remarkably honest and straightforward men who's ever had the misfortune to find himself here. A pillar of rectitude, almost a saint. Apart, of course, that is, from your unfortunate predilections, proclivities, and activities where small boys are concerned. Mr. Barton, you are a paedophile, someone, that is, who is sexually attracted towards young children, in your own case, small boys.
Yes.
And you are aware, are you, of the, well, I believe there are 3 or 4 of them now, the societies and organizations which have been formed and sprung up and attracted quite an amount of publicity from time to time. The societies of people who argue that such sexual attraction is nothing very abnormal, really, after all.
Well, yes, I've heard of, well, I've read about them in the newspapers and so on, yes.
You a member of any of them?
Of the societies and organizations for...
Yes.
No, I certainly am not.
But are you sympathetic towards their aims and objects?
No, I'm not.
Oh, you wouldn't argue then that there should be more public understanding and tolerance of people who feel as you do?
Mr. Edgar, is this line of questioning really strictly relevant?
My lord, in my submission, yes, but it's not vital. Mr. Barton, to come promptly then to at least one point, you yourself admit, do you not, that what is wrong with you is basically an illness, a perversion, which definitely requires treatment?
Yes.
Which is why now, at last, after 25 years, you are submitting yourself to it.
Yes.
What does this treatment consist of exactly, Mr. Barton?
Of seeing Dr. Allen twice a week at St. Saviour's Hospital.
Yes, well, I'm sure you'll appreciate that isn't an answer to my question, which was, what does the treatment consist of, not where are you having it and from whom?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. My treatment consists of taking the tablets prescribed by Dr. Allen and talking to him about my problem for half an hour on each of my twice-weekly visits.
I see. What are the tablets?
Pardon?
I said, what are the tablets?
I don't know.
Well, haven't you asked?
No.
Well, what's their purpose? What are they for?
Well, I suppose they're to try and...
With respect, my lord, since I've already made it clear that I shall be calling Dr. Allen later, I would suggest that he is the proper person to be asked questions of this kind. Mr. Barton is in no way medically qualified and therefore not competent to answer.
Mr. Edgar?
Well, my lord, since Mr. Barton is, after all, the person who is taking the tablets, perhaps I may at least be permitted to ask him what effect they are having on him. Thank you, my lord. Mr. Barton?
They are reducing my sexual feelings.
They are reducing your sexual feelings.
Yes.
Reducing? By that I take it you mean they're not completely wiped out. Did you hear my question?
Yes.
Did you understand it?
Yes.
Will you answer it then, please?
No.
I beg your pardon?
No, my sexual feelings are not completely dead yet.
Oh. Yes, I see. Thank you. Well, yes, you are this, what was called, painfully honest person about yourself, aren't you? But I think you would agree with me, would you not, Mr. Barton, that honesty, in fact, is very far from being defined merely, for example, as keeping one's fingers out of the till. There's, well, betrayal of trust, for instance, isn't there?
I'm sorry, I don't think I know what you mean.
Oh, I think you do, Mr. Barton. I think you do understand very well what I mean by the phrase betrayal of trust. You may not yet know specifically what I'm referring to, but you do know what those words mean. Well, now I'll tell you what I'm referring to, shall I? Of a specific instance of your betraying trust. When you were sent to prison, when you were, as we've heard, treasurer of a sailing club, sent to prison for offences involving indecency with young boys, who were those young boys, Mr. Barton? I don't mean their names, but who were they? Yes. They were young boys, weren't they, who were members of the sailing club of which you were an honorary official, and in which you took advantage of your position as an apparently respectable member of the management committee, not of filching money out of the till, no, but of doing something which many people would regard as far more serious indeed. Well, Mr. Barton, would you call that the action of an honest man? Now, the matter of your conviction, what, 8, 9 years ago, was it? Do you care to tell us who that person was you committed that crime against and was sent to prison for? No, of course you don't. It was your own 11-year-old nephew, was it not? The youngest child of your own sister, which was the reason, wasn't it, for your mother turning her back on you, and why it's taken her so many years to forget and forgive? Well, Mr. Barton, will you answer? So, now we've cleared the ground, or perhaps I should say background, shouldn't I? Well, almost. Mr. Barton, you've always pleaded guilty to charges against you when you were guilty, because you had in fact committed the offences. But are you also asking us to believe that there were not at other times other offences for which you were never detected and therefore never charged, but of course never dreamt of going and giving yourself up for?
Yes, no, yes, no.
Well, I'm sure I don't know what that means, and I shouldn't think anybody else does either. However, so, it's against this rather more, well, I was going to say truthful, but instead I'll say realistic background that we'll go on now, shall we, to the precise matter in question here today, which is what you did or did not do on Fallowfield Common on the afternoon of Friday, June the 16th. Now, you've told us, Mr. Barton, you didn't come onto the common via the path up through the woodland and shrubbery from the main road, but from the entirely opposite direction, that is to say, from the direction of St. Saviour's Hospital, where you'd been to see Dr. Allen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why did you go on the common, Mr. Barton?
Well, it was a warm day, a nice sunny day. I thought I'd walk home rather than take the bus, as I usually did.
Mr. Barton, I must ask you to think carefully for your own sake before you answer my question. You've just said, haven't you, that you thought you'd like to walk home rather than take the bus?
Yes.
Which sounds as though you're trying to give the impression that you were walking on the common on your way home. Is that what you are suggesting?
Yes.
The common isn't on your way home from St. Saviour's. It's almost exactly the opposite way.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I see what you mean. I didn't understand the question. I went to the pub across the road and had a drink, and then thought I'd go for a bit of a stroll and go back past the hospital and then walk home.
You came out of the hospital and went over to the pub for a drink.
Yes.
What do you mean by a drink?
Lager.
Mr. Barton, are you deliberately trying to give the impression of being a simpleton?
No, I'm sorry, but you see, I don't understand what
Please don't keep saying that, Mr. Barton. You seem to be falling back on it as an excuse with increasing regularity. Well, I'll try again. Well, it's surely not very difficult, is it? What do you mean by a drink? 3 pints of lager, 6, 12, or what?
Oh, yes, I see, I'm sorry. 1/2 a pint glass of bottled lager.
1/2 a pint glass of bottled lager. 1.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So you were not in any way under the influence of alcohol, not even slightly. You knew exactly what you were doing and where you were going.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yes, thank you. So you're not at any time later going to say, for example, that you were shaken and upset after your psychotherapy session, as people sometimes are. So to recover, you went across the road and had a few drinks at the pub, and as a result, found yourself wandering around a little later on a hot day without properly realizing where you were. You're definitely not going to say that.
No.
So, why did you go on the common?
Sorry, I don't really understand.
Mr. Barton, why did you go on the common? Why the common? Why not the road, somewhere else, some fields, anywhere? Why the common?
Well, I suppose because I saw the fair there. I thought I'd go and look at it.
Have a look at it, you say? What do you mean exactly? What sort of prizes they were offering on the stalls? What the sideshows were, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Yes, and what else?
Pardon?
What else did you go to look at?
I'm sorry, how do you mean? I don't really understand what you're trying to get at. What do you mean, people?
It surely do you mean people, isn't it?
Well, yes, I suppose so. Yes, I do mean people too.
Yes, you suppose you do mean people too. And people, of course, includes young boys, doesn't it?
Oh, no, not necessarily, no.
Are you seriously meaning to suggest it never even crossed your mind there'd be young boys there too?
No, that's not what well, of course I knew there'd be young boys. But, I mean, it wasn't like that.
What was it like then?
I just went to look.
And yet before long, what was it, 10 minutes at the most, and irrespective of what might or might not have happened in between, you end up chatting with a group of boys at a rifle range store. That's not been denied. That is who you were with, isn't it? A group of boys.
Yes, but it wasn't, I mean, it hadn't got anything, but you see, that was not intentional.
I see. However, let us continue. Now, you've said, Mr. Barton, on a number of occasions that you haven't properly understood a question. So I'll put this next one as simply as I can. Why do you think, out of all the people on the common, two boys should instantaneously and without hesitation pick out you as the one person who made an approach to them?
I don't know. Can't imagine.
I put it to you that you can imagine, and you do know. Mr. Barton, do I take it you're nodding your agreement?
It was very stupid.
I'm sorry. What was very stupid, Mr. Barton?
The whole idea.
What whole idea?
Of going on the common to look for boys.
Mr. Barton, would you repeat that?
I said of going on the common to look for boys.
Mr. Barton, does that mean that you're changing your plea?
You can join us again tomorrow when the case of the Queen against Barton will be concluded in the Crown Court. Reginald Barton had pleaded not guilty to charges of inciting two schoolboys to commit indecency with him. But under cross-examination, Barton has admitted that after a treatment session at the local hospital, he then deliberately went onto the common to look for boys. And at this admission, at the request of his defending counsel, there has been an adjournment.
Mr. Barton, since the beginning of this trial, you've stated that nothing whatsoever about yourself should be concealed, have you not?
I have asked that that principle be followed, yes.
Yes. So in order to dispel any confusion that might exist in the minds of one or two members of the jury about why we adjourned early yesterday, can we go over some of the ground that we've already covered?
Yes, please.
In his cross-examination of you, my learned friend for the prosecution asked you repeatedly why you chose to go for that stroll on the common in particular.
Yes.
And by persisting in his questioning of you about it, counsel for the prosecution eventually got you to admit, didn't he, that you did in fact have a specific reason for choosing the common rather than anywhere else?
Yes.
What was that reason, Mr. Barton?
Because I thought, among others, there would be boys over there, and I wanted to be in proximity to them.
Why did you want to do that?
Because I am a homosexual, who is, and always has been for the whole of his adult life, as far as I can remember, sexually attracted to young boys.
In answering one of my learned friend's questions, you used a particular phrase about your reason for going on the common. What was it? Would you say it again, please, using exactly the same words?
Yes. I said I went on the common to look for boys.
Did you mean it as an admission of guilt?
No.
What did you mean to convey then?
Well, seeing the fair there, I thought it was a good opportunity to go ahead and put myself to the test and talk to some boys there.
Putting yourself to the test? What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, Dr. Allen is prescribing tablets for me to lessen and perhaps even eventually to utterly destroy my sexual feelings altogether. But as long as I was taking the tablets, I felt that I would never know exactly when my feelings were no longer things I needed to be afraid of.
Cutting down on them had been Dr. Allen's suggestion, had it?
No. He said, why don't you experiment with them? Find out how large or small a dose you need.
What was the result?
I realized I had a long way to go and it was far too soon to cut down much on the tablets.
Mr. Barton, in conclusion, I'd just like to ask you this once more. Apart from where there were, as we've already said, people about all the time, and you were always out in the open and in full view, apart from that, did you talk to any boys anywhere?
No, I did not.
Thank you, Mr. Barton.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. That's all. You may return to the dock.
I would like to call Mr. Victor Samuels, please.
Mr. Victor Samuels. You can to the left.
Samuels, you are, I believe, the managing director of Vincent's, the building and contracting firm that employs the defendant, Mr. Barton.
Yes, I am.
Is he a good employee?
I wouldn't say that. I would say he was an outstandingly excellent one. Absolutely hard-working, reliable, and trustworthy.
So there's no question that as a result of these charges he faces, irrespective of whether he's found guilty or not guilty of them, of his not continuing in your employ?
Oh, certainly not. If, by some gross miscarriage of justice, he is found guilty, then of course he won't be able to. Until such time as he comes out of prison, that is. The day following which, he'll immediately resume working for me.
How long have you known Mr. Barton, Mr. Samuels?
4 years.
How did you meet him?
I met him in prison. I'm a prison visitor.
How long have you been doing this sort of voluntary... It is voluntary, is it? Yes. This sort of voluntary work?
12 years.
And would you say, therefore, that you could fairly be described as a very experienced prison visitor?
Well, it's hardly a phrase I'd use myself, but yes, I suppose you could.
And as such a long-experienced prison visitor, would you now give us your opinion of Mr. Barton as a person?
I think he's one of the most... No, I won't qualify that. I think he is the most honest person I've ever met.
Well, that's a very strong claim to make about anybody, isn't it? How well do you actually know him?
Well, a sexual offender of any kind is always literally a prisoner within a prison. Either he's kept for long periods in solitary confinement under Rule 43 for his own protection, or, if that's not absolutely necessary, then he has no friends among the other prisoners. They won't speak to him, they won't have anything to do with him, because he's considered among criminals as the worst and the most obnoxious type of offender, the absolute lowest of the low. So, for well over 2 years, when he was last in prison, all our conversations were held in these circumstances under these conditions. That's why I feel I got to know him in a particularly close fashion, if only because I was one of the very few people he could talk to.
So, Mr. Samuels, knowing him as well as you do, and as we've said, as a very experienced prison visitor, when he so emphatically denies these charges he's on trial for, what's your reaction to that?
I believe him, absolutely and completely. There can be no question of doubt about it whatsoever. He must be innocent.
Thank you, Mr. Samuels.
Mr. Samuels, it might perhaps be relevant to mention at the outset that as well as being a successful businessman, and I hope that's an accurate assumption, is it? You also hold a law degree, do you not?
Well, it's hardly for me to say whether it's relevant or not, I don't think, is it? However, that is true. I am a barrister at law.
Are you practicing, Mr. Samuels?
No, my lord. Oh, may I say that It's not because I was disbarred. I merely gave up my practice to become legal advisor to building contractors and then gradually moved more and more into the business side.
Oh, well, thank you for removing that possible misunderstanding.
My lord.
And as well as being managing director of a large company and a qualified barrister, and also a prison visitor, you have a number of other interests, do you not?
Oh, very many, yes.
Would you care to tell us about some of the better-known ones?
Good gracious, no. But they don't include homosexual activities or fancying young children, if that's what you were asking about.
No, Mr. Samuels, it wasn't.
I play a little chess.
Ah, so you describe this as what? Possibly the Alekhine defence?
I was thinking more of the Queen's Knight gambit. Decline.
Mr. Edgar, Mr. Samuels, please, if you'd be so kind, may we proceed?
My lord. Mr. Samuels, you are, am I not right, vice president of a society called Bail?
One among 16 vice presidents, to be precise.
One of the stated objectives of which...
Bail, did you say?
Yes, my lord. I believe, though Mr. Samuels will correct me if I have it wrong, that the name is formed from the initial letters of the organization's full name, BAIL, standing for Barristers Against Imprisonment League. One of the stated and well-publicized objectives of which is the total abolition of all forms of imprisonment for all crimes, whatever.
Yes. We believe that the correct way to deal with crime and the offender is in the community
Yes,
rather than by...
Thank you, Mr. Samuels. Those of us who wish can learn of the Society's aims from its many pamphlets and publications, but simply, I repeat, it, and you yourself presumably too, is and are against all imprisonment for any sort of offender.
Yeah.
So that no matter who appeared here in this court or any other charged with no matter what offence, if there was a prospect of their going to prison for it, you would always be prepared to speak up in their behalf.
Well, I wouldn't say I'd be as completely unselective as that. I wouldn't have much sympathy for, let's say, for instance, a barrister caught parking on double yellow lines. I would think that, as an upholder of the law, he should be meticulous in observing it. I wouldn't be prepared to offer much assistance to him.
Thank you, Mr. Samuels. I'm sure the assurance that you wouldn't speak for them will come as a relief to quite a few members of the legal profession.
Mr. Nisbet?
No, thank you, my lord. Mr. Samuel.
My lord.
And how long has he been your patient, Dr. Allen?
6 months. I see him twice a week for about half an hour at a time.
I understand he hasn't missed a single appointment since he began his treatment, has he?
No, not one. Not until it had to be suspended because he was arrested and kept in custody.
Is that unusual, a 100% attendance record for psychotherapy?
No, I wouldn't say it was unusual. But in view of the great emotional strain psychotherapy does often cause, particularly to patients who are not young, it does indicate a high degree of motivation in wanting treatment.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Allen.
Dr. Allen, when did you qualify?
Finally. In psychiatry. Last year.
Thank you. And where?
Edinburgh University. I have an American degree as well from Johns Hopkins Psychiatric Hospital, Baltimore. And, of course, the Oxford medical degree first.
Yes, quite. Well, thank you, Doctor. Now, I'm sure you'd agree with me that the members of the jury would appreciate a little expert guidance.
Well, I don't know if I'm the person to give it to them or not.
Don't you consider yourself an expert?
Well, no. Not in legal matters, not by any means.
Well, I didn't mean in legal matters, Doctor. I meant in medical ones. As, for instance, well, let's put it very simply. Is your patient, Mr. Barton, responding to treatment?
Sorry, I don't know what that means.
Oh, well, forgive me, I'll try again. In your opinion, since he began receiving treatment from you, has Mr. Barton improved? Would you say his perversion shows signs of being cured?
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult, but you see, you are using words in a totally different way to that in which they're used in psychiatry.
Well then, do please assist us, Doctor. Instruct us so we don't continue under misapprehension. Like what, for example? Please give an instance.
Well, there are several in what little's already been said. To begin with, I don't think any psychiatrist would agree with you using the word perversion to describe feelings of sexual attraction towards young children by an adult.
Very well, then let's just stick to the word sickness. Is that all right?
Oh, no, definitely not.
is not a perversion, it's not a sickness. What is it then, normal?
No, but you see, in psychiatric terminology, perverted isn't the opposite of normal, and nor is sick. Now, to begin with, a perversion is usually taken to mean a preferred form of behaviour. And as Mr. Barton certainly doesn't prefer to be as he is, and would much sooner be different, he can't therefore be called a pervert. Deviant, I suppose, would be more accurate. Although, of course, whether deviance is a sickness or not is really very doubtful. Secondly, I'm sorry, shall I go on?
Oh, please.
Well, I was going to say then there's the word normal, because you see, one person doesn't know, even if he's a doctor or if he isn't, exactly what the next person means by it. I think what all psychiatrists would agree on is, as a colleague of mine said in a book recently, the normal man is a very dark horse indeed. So what I'm getting around to, you see, is that if we are not even understanding one another when we say normal, then it's very difficult to know what we mean by a concept such as cure, if you see what I mean.
No, I don't think I do. But what I do now certainly see is why you said you didn't think you could be of much assistance to the jury, and I'm sure they'd agree with you. However, Doctor, if I may be allowed to put one final question to you.
By all means, yes.
And I hope you'll try to understand its meaning and answer it understandably. It's this. In your opinion, is the accused, Mr. Barton, a truthful or untruthful person? On the whole.
Truthful in what way?
If that man said that he had done something... No, if you'll forgive me, I'll start again. If that man there said that he had not done something, from your experience as a psychiatrist and your experience of him as a patient, would you believe him?
Well, what I believe would be totally irrelevant.
Oh, so that you would not be prepared to say that in the generally accepted sense of the term, he is a particularly truthful person?
Oh, good gracious, no. Neither particularly truthful nor particularly untruthful. It's a completely meaningless thing to say.
Thank you, Dr. Allen.
Mr. Nisbet?
I don't wish to re-examine. Thank you, my lord.
Thank you, Doctor.
That is the defence's case, my lord.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, at the beginning of this trial, I said to you that this was just a perfectly ordinary, simple case. And with all due respect to my learned friend for the defense, despite all his attempts to turn it into something different, I submit to you that that's what it still is and has fundamentally remained. The accused is charged with inciting two boys to commit an act or acts of indecency with him. Did he or didn't he? It's just as simple as that. Did he or did he not? Now, members of the jury, as I'm sure you know, it's not my job to secure a conviction. It is my job to put before you the facts on which the prosecution is based so that you can then decide whether those facts are in themselves sufficient to convince you of the accused's guilt. Facts. Not sentiment, not emotion, not sympathy or pity for someone who cannot help what he is or how he has behaved, but simply the facts concerning the behavior with which he is now charged. And they are simple, aren't they? While the two schoolboys, Geoffrey Gibson and Martin Clark, were looking for their lost 50-pence piece in the grass near the bushes, a man approached them and made an indecent suggestion to them. They heard what he said clearly, and they saw him standing there clearly, in broad daylight, just a few yards away. Very creditably, they ran and found a policeman and complained to him, and this policeman asked him to come with him and one of his colleagues to search amongst the fairground stalls nearby to see if they could pick the man out. Members of the jury, they did pick out and identify the man, this man, the accused. Now, for some reason which I find obscure, play has been made with the speed with which this identification was made, as though that in some way cast doubt on its reliability. Well, I'm sure most people would say, as I do, that this speed does the exact opposite, doesn't it? Makes it not less likely to be true, but more. They needed only one glance, that's all, to identify him. With respect to the defense, the fact that the man they picked out already had a string of convictions for similar offenses is neither here nor there. You see, it's been suggested that in some way or another, one of the policemen hinted to the boys that one man was a likely candidate. Well, the police emphatically deny this. And the evidence of the second of the two boys to be called, Martin Clark, members of the jury, did he strike you as someone who was likely to be influenced into something he wasn't sure of by anyone? Well, in conclusion, may I remind you also just of this, that it was the defence's own witness, Dr. Allen, who said that to claim that someone, anyone, was a particularly truthful person, more so than the next man, was, in his own phrase, completely meaningless. I'm sure you'll not forget that when you're weighing up in your minds, as you must do soon, whether to believe the accused or that young boy.
Members of the jury, should you by any regrettable mischance bring in a verdict of guilty, the accused will go straight to prison. His treatment by Dr. Allen, which is his one hope in life, will come to an end. And the whole dreary, meaningless process...
Mr. Nisbet, that is an improper observation. In the event of a verdict of guilty, it is I, not the jury, who will decide what the sentence will be.
With respect, my lord, I'm drawing the juror's attention to the matter of the accused already being under suspended sentence of imprisonment, and that will automatically come into operation should the verdict
Mr. Nisbet, I'm going to instruct the jury to ignore your remarks on this subject. Do I make myself clear?
My lord. Members of the jury, I hope I have made it plain in the evidence I have brought before you that you're being asked to believe in the honesty of a man who has throughout spoken consistently in a painfully direct and straightforward way. You've heard the phrase used, members of the jury, by a prison visitor, by somebody who knows exactly what he's talking about, that the sexual offender against children in prison is considered to be the lowest of the low. And I venture to suggest that it is not only and entirely in prison that such an attitude exists. There is something, let us be entirely frank about it, there is something about the subject of offences against children that arouses in us the feelings of the utmost revulsion. So basic and so fundamental, in fact, that they could fairly be described as being of a primitive, even instinctive nature. We can hardly bring ourselves to contemplate them, let alone begin to be rational about them. And nor would I even suggest that we should. All I ask is that we recognize these feelings of ours as a fact. Are you going to say to him, then, that in being honest, he ensures that he receives less than justice? That in refusing to hide anything, he's making a terrible, catastrophic mistake? For what has he revealed about himself? What has he insisted that you should know? That he's a burglar? That he's a safe blower? A bank robber, even? No. Not that he's one of these, what might almost be called respectable offenders, but that he was and is, members of the jury, a member of that group of offenders which society considers to be in prison, as well as out of it, the lowest of the low. What the defendant asks is that he be given no more nor less than any other man, but the same as any other person, which in this case can surely be nothing other than the benefit of the doubt.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, quite by coincidence, I just happened to be browsing through some books in my library at home last night after dinner when I saw quoted in one of them some words which I thought might well be appropriate in this case. They were spoken by one of my brother judges who died only a year or two ago after a long and most distinguished career in the course of what I believe was a lecture he gave to some young members of the legal profession. A jury, he said, is 12 ordinary citizens with probably little or no training in consecutive thought. They will be largely, if not entirely, swayed by emotion. But they will pride themselves on being susceptible only to strict logic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's scarcely necessary for me to tell you, since I've chosen to read those words to you, that they seem to me to be, from my own experience, at least, almost the exact opposite of what I have found. But I go out of my way to draw your attention to them because there have been moments in this trial when I felt that strong and continuous efforts were being made to obscure what you're here to consider, which is whether or not the prosecution prove their case, and to tempt you to reach your verdict on the basis of your feelings rather than on your powers of rational thought. Now, I'm sure it's not necessary for that to be emphasized, but I do just mention it. In this, as in any other case, members of the jury, you must lay aside your feelings, and I mean all your feelings of all kinds. You must not, and I'm sure that you will not, allow your verdict to be influenced by such things as whether you find the accused to be an unattractive personality towards whom you feel marked antipathy, or, on the other hand, whether you find him a sympathetic figure who arouses your sympathy and compassion. You must not, and I'm sure you will not. Nor, in taking into account what weight you should give to what was said by witnesses, must you allow yourselves to be influenced for or against them by their manner, their demeanor, their way of speaking, their clothes, their general appearance, or anything else. Just as I'm sure that it's not necessary for me to add either that you must not base your verdict on whether you prefer counsel for the prosecution to counsel for the defense, or vice versa. Remember only what was said. Do not give too much weight, unless you think it was very significant, as to how it was said or by whom. Of course, these things are important, but they're not the nub of the matter. What is your consideration of the facts. And these I shall now briefly recapitulate for you.
The prisoner will stand. Members of the jury, will your foreman please stand? Please answer these questions, yes or no. Have you reached a verdict on which you are all agreed?
Yes.
On the first count of inciting a child to commit an act of gross indecency, do you find the defendant Reginald Barton guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
On the second count of inciting a child to commit an act of gross indecency, do you find the accused guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.